Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I rise to speak out at the ongoing crisis of gas prices. Now, the hurt to households is bad enough, and we all, if we're honest, can recount stories which continue of pensioners through winter not being able to heat their houses. But this crisis is smashing Australian manufacturing and continues to threaten thousands of jobs. The tragedy of this is Australia is about to overtake the nation of Qatar as the world's biggest gas-producing exporting nation. And yet we do not have enough gas for our domestic market. We're producing more gas than any time in our history, but it's at the highest prices. This is a nonsense, it's a failure of policy, and it's insane. This is enormously important in my electorate of Bruce. I said in my first speech to this place that manufacturing continues to be the largest single employment sector in my electorate, employing thousands of people. Now, I met 2 weeks ago in Parliament with a delegation of workers brought here by the Australian Workers' Union from East Coast states, from New South Wales, Victoria and Queensland. The same message, the workers from Gladstone to Dandenong, the same plea. The crisis continues, jobs are being lost, there are jobs at risk, and we had case study after case study of doom. Once these jobs are gone, they do not come back. They're offshored, they're gone. They don't just restart if the gas price goes down. Now, last September I visited the Ace Metal Treatment factory in Clayton in my electorate with the Leader of the Opposition. We heard firsthand that their gas bill had risen from $500,000 a year to $1.2 million a year. They can't cut any more costs. They've invested in new plant, they've become more efficient, they're using less gas, they've changed their labour arrangements, but they cannot sustain those kind of prices. And the same story is heard with numerous businesses across the East Coast. So when there, last September, the Leader of the Opposition formally called on the government to pull the trigger and act on gas export controls. So why didn't they act? Well, there's a lot of speculation. Some of the speculation was the then Deputy Prime Minister was a New Zealand citizen. They knew they were heading for a by-election, and they did not want the decisions he made, a big decision like that, to be vulnerable to challenge in the court. Other speculation, the Prime Minister just has a philosophical objection to upsetting his mates in big business. So what did the government do? Well, the Prime Minister got the gas companies into a room and he waved his finger at them. He gave them a good talking to. Then he shook hands and he told us the problem is fixed. Well, it's not fixed. The crisis continues. The government's newspaper of choice, the Australian newspaper, usually we get that quoted back at us, said yesterday the Prime Minister's threats haven't worked. The average Sydney and Melbourne wholesale spot prices went up 40% last year. The January prices in both cities, Melbourne and Sydney, are the highest on record for a January. This was reported yesterday, mind you. The gas chiefs were quoted as saying, well, that's bad luck. High prices are here to stay. Business will just have to suck it up, adapt. Well, businesses in my electorate cannot sustain the current prices. They've squeezed every last drop out of their cost structure. They're close to hitting the wall. Now, the other reality is even. Let's just presume that some of the claim of the Prime Minister was true, that we saw some reduction for some businesses in some areas if they were lucky enough to get a deal. The handshake agreement has done nothing for businesses like Ace Metal Treatment. I rang them last week to see how they're going, that were forced to sign utterly unsustainable contracts with a gun at their head last year. You can't stay connected to the gas if you're that kind of user without a big contract, a multi-year contract in place. You have to have a contract. So they were forced to sign a contract. They heard of one supplier and they thought, oh well, maybe the prices come down after the Prime Minister's handshake and finger waving. So they rang their gas company and said, well, can we renegotiate? This is a force majeure clause, an unexpected event, a change in the market. And the gas company said, you can get nicked, you can pay, or we'll sue you and cut you off, put you out of business. It's not good enough. The Prime Minister's handshake agreement gives no legal obligation on companies to increase supply. It's unenforceable, it's weak. If the government was serious, they would have pulled the trigger last November, on the 1st of November, but now they're stuck. They don't have the statutory right to do that until the 1st of November this year, so the clock is ticking. If you don't believe Labor, if you don't believe workers losing jobs, if you don't believe businesses, if you don't believe the Australian newspaper, then I'd point out that the Prime Minister and Cabinet's own regulatory impact statement on the Prime Minister's handshake option warned, I quote, it's likely that this option, the handshake, would result in some users exiting the market, resulting in a loss of jobs and economic output, which is exactly what we're seeing. So the government's one-point economic plan, cut multinational taxes for big companies and hope that something trickles down, is clearly not working. Every job lost between now and November, when they have the opportunity to act again, will be on the head of the Prime Minister, and Labor will not let Australians forget it.